Good morning. In a time of unprecedented challenges, digital technologies offer a promise of hope for businesses and society. Digital technologies are the one consistent force that will allow us not just to survive, but to thrive. They got us through the pandemic, and now we have to point them at the challenges we currently face. That's why I've titled this talk, Recoding Business, a leadership agenda for the software economy. We live in a software economy. Digital technologies will enable, we should recode our businesses to be suited to the software economy, to build stronger businesses and a better world. This must be our leadership agenda. Now, why do I call this a software economy? Well, here's Exhibit A. This is a chart from the Federal Reserve from 1990, when we spent $50 billion a year on proprietary software. We invested $50 billion in proprietary software. In 2022, we're on track to spend $570 billion on software, an 11-fold increase in 30 years. This is not the routine software. This is the intellectual property that each of our companies aggregated spends on software. This is the software that defines us. Our companies are inextricable from the software that we deploy every single day. This, my friends, is what the software economy is all about. But where do we spend our money today? Clearly, AI is at the top of this list. But AI is very, very different from the traditional software of the past, in which we codified the know-how that we already possessed. And we leveraged it, we amplified it, we scaled it. But the AI today is being used to discover new knowledge, deliver new insights. Let me give you an example. In biochemistry, there's a challenge which is called protein folding. So the challenge is to predict the three-dimensional structure of a protein from its one-dimensional amino acid sequence. This has been thwarting the world's best scientists, including Nobel laureates, for the last 50 years. They've been working for years and years and years trying to identify the three-dimensional structure of proteins. This is extremely important in drug discovery and pollution control. It has an incredible number of uses. About 30 years ago, they started a competition called CASP, C-A-S-P. We're now at CASP 15 this December. In CASP 13, so every year, these world-class scientists have been making incremental, every 2 years, I should say, it's a biennial, these scientists have been making modest improvements in the algorithms that they use, and actually in the techniques that they use to predict the three-dimensional structure of proteins. CASP 13, which was in 2018, comes along, and out of nowhere, a surprise team wins. And it was DeepMind, Alphabet's deep learning division out of London. And they won by a fairly significant margin. So the modest improvements of the past 30 years were gone, and all of a sudden the margin increased. 2 years later, they won in a blowout. That's the best way to say it, right? They improved the state of performance so much that a particular class of proteins, the structure of a particular class of proteins was considered solved. People had to stop working on their PhD dissertations because this company with sort of a very modest amount of biological and biochemical sort of capability was beating scientists who had been working in this area for many, many years. The story gets better. Last year, they published a database and the algorithms. They had 1 million structures last year in their database, 1 million three-dimensional structures of proteins. This year, they have 200 million structures in their database. This is every darn protein known to science. So this contest, which had been unsolved for years, DeepMind has solved it, and even better, They are giving away the algorithms, they are giving away the structures for free in an open source database that any one of us can solve. So not only do we have the challenge of assimilating a faster rate of theorizing than we've ever done, it shows you the power of artificial intelligence. Just 2 days ago, I read in the Financial Times that a company called Verge Genomics out of San Francisco actually has launched, is testing its new drug for a tough disease, ALS, and that drug was discovered by AI. This is the power of AI. AI is recoding business. And then, of course, robots are another facet of the software economy. We all know about robots. 2 years ago, I'm sorry, not even 2 years ago, 2 years ago, yes, we were very concerned about how robots would displace human beings. The conversation in all of these circles was about, are robots going to displace, what's going to happen to jobs? What's going to happen to people? Are we all, we're talking about universal basic income. We'll have to pay people to not work. Well, guess what happened in 2 years, as Jagdeep was alluding to yesterday? We've got a completely different picture in front of us. We're now actually happy to have the robots do the work for us. So it's not just, it's retail, it's warehousing, it's distribution, but it's also tough jobs that people have a hard time doing. Cleaning barnacles off the side of ships, de-icing planes, bomb detonation. Robots are very much a part of our labor force, and they're only going to grow in response. The one cautionary note I would add is we really need to think about designing robots that augment labor, that makes us more valuable to work with the robots, and not just think of it solely as a replacement for human beings. And then, of course, another facet of the software economy is metaverse. And metaverse is no longer just for play. Metaverse is becoming real at corporations. 3M has launched digital Post-it notes, which they've done for a while. But now this is in partnership with Microsoft Teams. And as we move to a world of hybrid work, we have to think about how, one of the questions we always get is, how do we facilitate collaboration? How do we facilitate innovation in a world of hybrid work? Well, here's a tool. Now, you might say this is not really metaverse, but when you talk to the folks at 3M, what they will tell you is this is phase one. It is going to become a far more immersive experience than it is today. But you're beginning to see the emergence of a powerful new tool in a business setting. And closer to home, or at least closer to the university, we're using it in surgery to train surgeons to actually be better at their craft. And a story that really touches my heart is one of our UC sister campuses is actually using metaverse to take the opportunities for surgery to disadvantaged kids, showing them what surgery can look like, allowing these kids to have a virtual scalpel in their hand and imagine a career that was previously unimaginable to them. This is the power of metaverse. We can build a more inclusive workforce, and we can train our workforce better. And my favorite topic, what do we make of Web3? Web3 is obviously a blockchain, is a set of blockchain. It's based on blockchain technologies. It includes such things as decentralized finance, cryptocurrency, NFTs, and decentralized autonomous organizations. Think of these as cooperatives run by a set of rules, but the rules are driven by algorithms, and you vote with tokens. So when people ask me, what do you make of Web3? I have a very simple answer. I don't know what to make of Web3. And that, I think, is the point, which is in a software economy, we are always going to encounter technologies that we don't fully grasp, that may or may not turn out to be useful, but they're out there. And we, in our organizations, are thinking about, is this something we want to invest in? Just last night, I was talking with Kevin Tierney of GM, and he was talking about how Ford and how Argo AI shut down, and Ford seems to have slowed its move towards autonomous cars. These are the choices that companies confront every single day about whether they want to invest in a technology and how much they want to invest and when they want to stay with it. Now, Web3 is interesting for a different set of reasons. We were promised with the internet and the web, if you can remember, decentralization, democratization, all of these good things. What did we get instead? very powerful platforms. Our privacy has been sacrificed. Our security has been compromised. We didn't get the things that we were asking for. So I believe that the folks who are working in Web3 are asking some very serious questions. They're trying to deliver on powerful solutions. I'm not sure all of them will turn out well, but the questions that they're raising, sort of highlighting the questions that we as a society need to answer, are spot on. And I think this is one of the things we have to think about. But this, too, is part of recoding business. Being ready, being able to analyze, being able to examine, deciding when to invest, that, too, is part of recoding our businesses. So let me dig a little deeper and share a story about what recoding business means in its entirety. So this is the story of Abbott. And Abbott, as we all know, because of the pandemic, is sort of my colleague is smiling. It's Binax now and the Navica app. And if you travel to India like I did, it's a lifesaver where they require you to have proof of your vaccine on the day before you travel, not any longer, but they used to. But I want to talk to you a little bit about a different story, about this product they call the Freestyle Libre, now in its 3rd edition. If you see what the soccer player has on her arm, it's a disc-like device. It's the size of 2 stacked quarters. It measures analytes in your interstitial fluid, in this case, your glucose level. And you say, well, where is the software in that? Well, you take out your smartphone, you wave it by this device, and it downloads 8 hours of data onto your smartphone. Now, all of a sudden, you have incredible access to your historical data over 8 hours. It warns you when your blood sugar is dangerously low or dangerously high, things like that. That is the power of what software can do for these devices. It is now the #1 continuous glucose monitoring device in the world. They have 4 million in use. But when you talk to Robert Ford, as I did, who is the CEO of Abbott, the story he tells is really interesting. So here, this is a digital story. It's a software story. But he says, I was not motivated by a fear of being disrupted. I was not motivated by competitive pressure. I was driven by a vision. And the vision is one of connected health. The vision is one of consumer involvement in our own healthcare. The vision is one of giving each of us better data and more insights into our own bodies. That was the story he was trying to tell. He said, this is the problem we were trying to solve. And he said, but we didn't have the software capabilities. So we went out and hired the best software engineers we could from Google and a bunch of other tech giants and said, this is the kind of talent that we need to actually build these products and services. And then he said something else. He said, we're not trying to solve big technical software challenges. What we are really trying to solve is the problem of healthcare at scale. That is what drives us every single day of us going to work. So that was what he was focused on. Products in this space were always developed by scientists and so on, and now they've got software leaders sitting with these scientists jointly developing these products. This is how they have gained competitive advantage to become the #1 player in the CGM space, through this consistent focus on the vision that they have of better health for more people. But the story doesn't end there. The economy, as we know, all continues to evolve. And this is the beauty of software. Their new product, which they announced, get this is a healthcare company announcing at CES. It is the first healthcare company ever to keynote CES, Consumer Electronics Show. And their new product, which is still under works, but has been announced, it's called Lingo. And as we all know, lingo means language. And their philosophy is our bodies speak to us, but we don't know how to listen to it, and we certainly don't know how to interpret it. So the same technology that they've built to read these analytes, to interpret these analytes in our interstitial fluid, they're now using for glucose. They're using for ketones for people. So glucose is obvious. Ketones are for people on keto diets. They want to know whether their bodies are in ketosis or not. That's the aspiration. Lactate is for performance athletes who want to know what their lactate thresholds are. And alcohol. So you know when you're had a little too much and you shouldn't be driving, and they're working on linking that reading to your car, so it won't allow you to turn on your car. These are consumer products. These are no longer medical products. But I want to point to the woman on the left she's tracking ketos, whether her body's in ketosis or not. That's a ketone sensor. You can't see it from there, I'm sure. But the person on the right, on my right, I guess your right too, Eliud Kipchoge. He is a world-class, he's the #1 marathoner in the world. He's the only person to have run a sub-2-hour marathon. It wasn't counted as an official score because the wind aided him too much apparently on that day. But he has run the fastest marathon in the world. He now trains with this because over the course of 2 hours, he needs to understand what is happening to his glucose levels. And so they're using it at that level. Now, wouldn't it be nice if all of us actually, if you were concerned about glucose, you could actually get an inexpensive device that allows us to see how our bodies are doing sort of over the... I played with this. I talked my doctor into giving me a prescription that, of course, my insurance company wouldn't approve, but I paid for it. Because the thing that I had read was each of us reacts to the same food differently. So I might eat cheesecake and nothing happens to me, and Marcello here might eat cheesecake and his blood sugar could spike. I mean, we have different sort of these gut bacteria and things like that. So I just tracked myself for about a month and I said, okay, these foods don't work for me and these foods are pretty good for me. But it was just sort of like, why can't we have more data about ourselves? So this is where he's going, or Robert Ford or Abbott is going with what they're doing. And this, again, is the power of a software platform. Once build once, run many times. And you'll hear from Marcello in a few minutes, very much a similar story in a completely different sector of how a platform strategy actually plays out for them. But the story doesn't end there. Recoding business is also about building a better world, as I started this talk with. When you talk to Robert Ford, what he will tell you is there is a huge challenge with health equity in this world. The difference in life expectancy between rich countries and poor countries is 18 years. That is incredible. Diabetes is one of the top 2 leading causes of death and disability. And so when they thought about this is what they were talking about. We're building for scale. We're solving for scale. And what does that mean? They designed cost and affordability, as he put it, from day one of R&D. So, for example, the original device could only do 10 days of glucose monitoring. And they worked to get that up to 14 days because that not only reduces the cost to the user, but it also helps the environment. And they have a flat price, so their market research showed them that they could charge twice as much as they're charging. They chose to charge half as much because they thought it is important to solve the problem of health at scale. This is what I mean by recoding business to build stronger organizations and a better world. We can all do it if we just design some of these objectives into our principles from the get-go. Switching a little bit to sort of the dynamics of digital transformation. So that's the end story around Abbott Labs. But recoding is a very, very complex set of transformations. It requires, in fact, sort of the yin and yang of transformations, the harmonious transformations. So what do I mean by that? It's very easy to focus on the cool stuff around digital transformation. You can look at the Abbott device, and things like that. But there's a whole set of complementary transformations that need to occur. And so let me give you a few examples of sort of how all of these changes need to happen at the same time. So one, like we talked about last night, you get self-driving cars. You can now sort of call one to take you anywhere in San Francisco. It's a cruise car. Everybody's thrilled about, or at least I think my friends are thrilled with sort of the concept of self-driving cars. And that's the cool part of digital transformation, right? But there's this part that Kevin referred to last night. There's 100 million lines of code in cars even before we started talking about self-driving. And so there's a whole system, an architecture, if you will, in cars that allows us to pull off the cool part of digital transformation. But all this software needs to get built, this architecture needs to get designed. And yes, cybersecurity is a very key part of this architecture, among other things like being able to download software over the air and a variety of other consumer features that we all care about. Another great example, Taco Bell. This is a store in New York City. As you can see, it's fully digital. You don't see any employees. The way it works is like we all do these days. You order through your app, you order through a kiosk. The food, you can see, is put in those little cubbies to the left of the Taco Bell sign. Those are like little mailbox sort of slots where they put the food from the back kitchens, and you go grab them. But what it took to do this, so this is what we would call edge computing, right? But to pull this off, they needed a massive cloud transformation. So there's stuff that happens in the edge, but the algorithms that, for example, handle customers in their loyalty program are actually all run in the cloud. The calculations for what should be made when the operations of each restaurant are calculated in the cloud. So you see the fun part about all the stuff that, the kiosk, but there's a massive transformation that's gone on in the back end that doesn't really get a rest. And that's what most of you in this room do every single day. And then a fun example. If you've heard about the AI and Van Gogh exhibit, imagine what it would be like to be inside a Van Gogh painting. And there's so if this tour, this is an exhibition or a show that is touring the world. Actually, you can go to it in pretty much in hundreds of cities across the world. And what it is so you walk into these rooms and you get this completely immersive experience. It's really quite amazing. But again, what we're not talking about is how do they build this immersive experience? And this is something we all understand. It's all about data. They took every single Van Gogh painting and every single sketch, analyzed it using something called, again, a generative adversarial network. We don't have to worry about what that is, to identify the brush strokes that Van Gogh used, right? So the way they talk about it is the data is the paint, and the algorithm is the brush stroke. And so when you walk into this immersive experience, these brush strokes are being generated by an AI. And now we've all heard about generative AI, and we're talking about an immense order of magnitude improvement, particularly on the creative side, when you can just give it a textual prompt and it can write a paragraph or two for you, or you give it a textual prompt and it can come up with a painting for you. We're at sort of the infancy of this kind of transformative technology, but this is all on the roadmap already. But the point of all of this is, there's so many multiple transformations that need to happen for us to get to a future state. But the picture is not all good. There's a lot of new risks to business. Cybersecurity, obviously, is a huge risk. We're going to hear from Chris Inglis, who's a national cyber director, and Kevin Tierney and Nicole, who are also going to talk about cybersecurity. And who can forget a Colonial Pipeline, right? It was a simple hack, actually. It wasn't a very sophisticated hack. It was human error to a large degree, or lack of human roles and responsibilities. But it shut down oil operations around the eastern seaboard. Or you think about solar winds. Or you think about LA Unified a couple of weeks ago. Or you think about my hospital chain, Scripps Health in San Diego. All of them shut down by a variety of different cyber attacks. If we are to realize the promise of technology, we have to address the risk. And sadly, we're at a state where the cyber criminals are individuals, they're teams, they're nation states. It is a very, very difficult set of circumstances that we all have to cope with. And then, of course, there are risks to society as well. This is a picture of a cafe in San Francisco. It's oddly called Brainwash Cafe. And for years, they actually used a webcam to record the images of everybody who came into the cafe. They did this without consent. And this database then became available to a whole bunch of researchers who actually analyzed it to do facial recognition, and other sorts of artificial intelligence, machine learning uses. And then they got busted by a bunch of people, and of course all the scientists had to pull down the database. But in the meantime, something really deadly happened. A foreign adversary, who I won't name, used this data for what they call head detection. The idea being, how can we identify a head using an image so we can take them out? That is the scary part of, that's an extreme example, I know, but that is what we have to be very, very concerned about. And in many cases, AI is going way too fast for regulators and policymakers and even institutional review boards to keep up with, because it requires a level of technological complexity that we don't often have, which of course is all causing a huge demand for policy. So we're seeing antitrust policy, we're seeing obviously things like GDPR in Europe, but we're also seeing an AI Bill of Rights that just came out from the White House. Now, this hasn't really been translated into a set of policies yet, but the ideas of protections for individuals are out there, and this is the new business context we all have to live with. So with that as context, how do we actually compete in this software ecosystem? What does it actually mean to recode business? And I've broken it down into a set of steps. It begins with recoding assets. And what I mean by that is software, as we've talked about already, is the number one asset that companies are investing in. We saw it in the chart that I showed you, but it is an extraordinarily important asset on our balance sheets. Not always recorded in our balance sheets. But there's another thing that I want to highlight for you, which is software is an intangible asset. And intangible assets have very, very different economic properties than tangible assets. So we all grew up in a world of tangible assets. We know how to invest in buildings, property, plant, equipment. We understand how to do a financial calculation on those. Intangible assets are very different. And let me just say, they have implications for business strategy. They have implications for business models. They have implications for talent. They have implications for culture. So we have to get our heads wrapped around when we become organizations centered on intangible assets, much in our companies needs to change. And we'll bring some of these issues out during the course of the conversations. Another thing we have to change, of course, is capabilities and talent. This is a picture of a cherry picker, looks like a cherry picker anyway, building cell phone towers for Verizon. They spend $3 billion a year on installing these cell towers. And what they're using AI for in this example is to figure out the optimal location of the cell towers. This is a massive capital expense that they can cut back on if they locate them correctly. Now, you would think this would be pretty easy to do. It's actually very hard to do because every location has buildings, mountains, trees, weather patterns, who knows. But they're using machine learning to actually optimize where these things go. But to do this, you need an amazing level of AI talent. And we're going to hear from Meghna Sinha in the afternoon. And she heads an AI Center of Excellence at Verizon, where she will talk to us about what they are doing to build that particular capability. There's one other capability I want to highlight, which I alluded to, particularly in the Web3 situation. We have to have officially identified capabilities to sense, seize, and transform. And what do I mean by that? We have to sort of scour the landscape for what technologies are out there. Are they going to be important? Are they going to be useful? And once we agree that they are, then you have to seize the opportunity. That's the seize. And then you have to transform your business. You have to adapt your business to suit the new opportunities that become available. Because many of them, are fundamentally transformative technologies. They don't slot into your existing business processes the way traditional technologies might have. Then you have to recode culture. I break culture down into 3 categories: speed, risk, and product. On speed, I will simply say, we're moving faster than ever. Investments in software are accelerating. We have a panel in a few minutes that was going to talk about how, we all learned how to move really fast during the pandemic, right? Now we have to ask ourselves, how do we sustain that pace? How do we break down cultural barriers that we did during the pandemic and continue those in the future? So that's speed. In terms of risk, we're not used to failing very often. Venture capital firms say, if we succeed 1 in 10 times, we're good. You do that, you succeed 1 in 10 times in your corporation, you'll be in the unemployment ranks, right? So we have to solve that problem. In a world of change, we have to find a way to allow more risk and not penalize. I mean, you can't not penalize risk all the time, but we have to find the right balance between how do we foster innovation and manage the risk. And third of all, product. We have to think about advancing or enhancing the role of software developers. For years, we've been in a world where software developers are order takers. Somebody designs what product you want, and you say, okay, software team, go build this thing we want you to build. Today, I would argue that with software being as important as it is, software developers need to be front and center. They need to be telling us what these products actually are, because they are the experts in understanding what can be done with software. Then I want to talk a little bit about recoding business models. This is the Disney business model from 1957. You see creative talent studio, you'll see TV, you see music, you see merchandise licensing, you see publications. The point I want to make was Walt Disney always understood that this intangible asset, his intellectual property, was the characters and the stories that they told. And from day one, they have synergized all of these assets. So going to a theme park gets you to buy more merchandise. Watching a television show or an animated show encourages you to go to the theme park and buy more merchandise. So this thing, they have really learned how to exploit the synergies between all of their different facets of their business. And if you look today, this is what their intellectual property universe looks like. It used to be just Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and Donald Duck and those characters, right? And now they've got the Marvel universe. They've got the Star Wars characters. They've Indiana Jones. They even own The Simpsons. They have not just doubled down, they have quadrupled down on intellectual property. And the reason I emphasize that is because we talked about early mover advantage in the software industry. But guess what's really happening? Disney, when they came out with Disney Plus, was lagging Netflix by hundreds of millions of subscribers. This year, they beat Netflix in the global number of subscribers they have by just 1 million, but they were hoping to do it by 2025. They did it by 2022. And they did it because they have an intellectual property core. And Disney Plus, they have stories that people love, existing customer base, and are they leveraging those synergies between their different divisions? This allowed them to sort of understand the core principles of a software economy, which is something we all need to think about. What is your core intellectual property asset, and how do you build a business model and use technology to leverage your core intellectual property, whether it's drug development, whether it's entertainment, it doesn't matter. You really have to think about how you can use software to do that. And I could think of no better example to close this talk with than Moderna. Moderna calls itself a digital biotech. They had the advantage, if Marcello will allow me to say, they're a young company. So they saw the potential of software from the start, and they built an entire company around it. I won't give away Marcello's punchlines, but I will simply say this. They are exactly what we're talking about. They have recoded their business, and they continue to work on further recoding their business. So they deploy a very innovative platform strategy. And the more you learn about things, it's a really fascinating story of how they don't follow the design principles of traditional pharma. They are really doing things their own way. Now, it helps that mRNA is fundamentally a digitally friendly technology, but it is a really powerful story of how you can leverage all of these principles to build a company that is both a very profitable company, but is also helping build a better world. Many of us here, we don't know what the outcomes would have been, but if Moderna and Pfizer hadn't done their bits, I think the world could be a very, very different place. And I would urge all of us to think about how can we build stronger organizations and build a better world. With that, thank you so much for your attention.